I know.
What's that? No control over her?
I have no control. Okay, the time is 8:36 p.m. and we are now reconvened in open session. We will now consider action on closed session items. Mr. George.
Yes, Madam President. I move to appoint Audra Udi to the position of Executive Director of Assessment and Accountability.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. George and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Is she here?
Yep.
Yay! Congratulations. All right, next, Mrs. James.
I move to appoint Lisa Costin to the position of Director of Assessment and Accountability.
Second.
We have a motion by Mrs. James and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Is she here? Motion passes. Ms. Hilliger.
Yes, I move to appoint Alice Ledford to the position of Director of Innovation and Continuous Improvement.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Helliger and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Did everyone vote? I do, yes. I did vote. It's green. Which, is it me? Should we do a show of hands? Okay, all in favor, please show your hands. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Burdine.
Yes, Madam President. I move to appoint Rebecca Bangstein to the position of Director of Talent Acquisition.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Burdine and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Can we use our... Okay. Okay, good. It's the little things. Motion passes. Mr. Burdine.
I move that the board authorize the superintendent to offer employment in the event an administrator position vacancy occurs before August 11th, 2017.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Burdine and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. And Mr. George.
Yes, Madam President. I move that the board approve and authorize the board president to execute the resignation and release agreement between Fort Bend ISD and Noel Gwendy as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. George and a second by Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. Moving on to the board members' reports, we'll start with the activity report. Ms. Helliger.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Dawson. For the board meeting date, July 17th, over the past month, we've been on vacation, but we've still been busy. We've attended a policy committee meeting, a Go Public Gulf Coast annual meeting, State Senator Miles' office opening, the grand opening of Wharton County Junior College Richmond campus, new construction and renovation, Missouri City Leadership Luncheon featuring Representative Ron Reynolds, Houston Galveston Area Council Brown Bag Luncheon, meeting with Governor Abbott's aides regarding special session, participate in TASA advocacy panel, International MicroSociety Convention, Kingsville, Texas, Texas State School Safety Center Board meeting, Corpus Christi, Internal Audit Committee meeting, Patterson and Neal and elementary school visits, meeting with Senator Boris Miles.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger.
You're welcome.
Moving on to special reports. Do we have anyone with a special report?
Yes.
Oh, thank God.
And it's going to be more than 5 minutes. Okay. So let's see. Last weekend, I traveled down to Kingsville ISD in Kingsville, Texas, for the International MicroSociety Conference. Mr. Troy Byrne from admin, the Director of Transformational Education, was also present, which I'm very happy that someone from admin and Troy went. And so I had first learned about this from a talk at TASB in June. The folks from Kingsville, from 2 elementary schools, along with their superintendent, presented, and it was just eye-opening. I was so excited about that presentation, and they had said that they were having an international conference, and it truly was international. So believe it or not, there were people from all over the United States and Colombia and Canada in Kingsville, Texas. The Hampton Inn was sold out, so I had to get, and Troy, we ended up across the street because the Hampton Inn was sold out. But it was, so it was Sunday through Tuesday. I was only able to stay Sunday and Monday, and then I headed back. But it was really amazing. It was just a continuation of what I saw at TASB. So I have some pictures, and I'd like to just kind of go through a few of the pictures and discuss kind of what I saw. And let's see if this works. How about that? Awesome. So what MicroSociety is, it's really like a philosophy where kids get to live out real life inside a school. And so each school becomes its own town. And for the most part, most organizations, and actually MicroSociety is a nonprofit organization run out of Philadelphia. It's been actually alive for probably 30 years or so. So they do training, and they'll provide trainers and curriculum and whatnot. But so it's, again, it's a philosophy. So each school creates their own society. So in Kingsville ISD, there are 4 elementary schools. Believe it or not, a little town like that has 4 elementary schools. So they started really with Perez Elementary maybe 2 years ago. So this is pretty recent, and they've really grown the program. Now all 4 elementary schools have the program in various stages, but Perez and then another one, Clayburg, they were kind of the leaders. So the first day of the conference, a lot of the kids had their ventures. So they have these businesses that they call ventures. So there's all kind of vocabulary that these kids are learning in first grade. And so this was the Pantherville Bank. And the 2 kids in the front, I spent quite a bit of time talking with them. The boy on the right, he was telling me the difference between credit cards and debit cards. The girl on the left was telling me how she accompanied her grandmother and her mother to the bank and explained to them how to endorse a check and what an endorsement meant. And then they had the security guard in the back there. And on the picture on the right, the girl with the black robe, she's one of the judges in Pantherville. So this is one of the ventures. This was the travel company. And so the girl on the left, I was just watching. She was giving this guy basically a virtual tour of all the artifacts. So this year they did Egypt. And so they have researchers. You can't really see it, but on the rightmost picture, you see where it says job openings. So they have managers and researchers and like tour guide. I mean, so it's a business. They run it as a business. And so all these kids are involved. And there's, I think, about 400 kids at this elementary school. So part of the problem with some of ours is you'd have to have a lot of jobs for some of our schools where we have 800 kids, you know, and so you'd have to do some adaptations, but it's amazing. And so they sell things like I bought this with Paulers, so that's what they call their monetary system, you know, like PAW, you know, Paulers. So this was a little creation that this group had made. I think this was like 10 Paulers, okay? And I was asking them what they would do with this, and I got some interesting responses. But they're so proud of this stuff, and they learn so much. And again, they learn this whole vocabulary system in first grade. Okay, so this one is the newspaper, and I forget, one was the editor, and I think the other one did research and whatnot in this case. But again, they have a whole thing where this venture has a whole bunch of jobs. So each kid has a job, and it's amazing. They put out a really nice little newspaper, and they're real proud of it. And one of the things that the Kingsville folks kept saying over and over again was that these kids do not like to miss MicroSociety Day. So MicroSociety Day is 3 days a week at this place. Again, you can implement it any way you want. So 3 days a week, one of the periods, so 45 minutes, they go to their ventures. Or if they're in city council, then they go there. If they're the law enforcement folks, that they gather there. If they're holding court that day because somebody got fined and has a citation to pay and didn't pay the citation, then they go to court. And it is life. They are living life inside a school. And so these kids on MicroSociety days, they don't like to miss. Kingsville had a problem. They were losing a lot of kids to neighboring districts, even 30, 40 miles away. And that changed. I mean, immediately, as soon as they implemented this program, kids came back. The parents are involved. They have incredible partnerships with businesses. And in the next picture, you'll see with the local judge. And it's amazing. So kids don't want to miss school. They'll tell their parents, no, I can't have a doctor's appointment that day. It's MicroSociety Day, and I won't get paid if I miss it. So it's really an amazing program. So this is the Census Bureau. So I was talking to this kid, and he's actually a special needs kid, and it was, I'll tell you a little bit of a story about him. But so we were talking about, well, how do you get your funds? And it was through taxes. So we had a conversation about taxes. And it involves everything. This is the Pantherville Nature Center. It turns out that at Perez Elementary, they have this big pecan tree. And so these kids, they've done the history of the tree and all this kind of stuff, and then their venture is collecting and shelling and selling the pecans. And there's me. That was at the Pantherville Photography Studios. They had such a mad rush on all the capes that I got there too late, so I just had I couldn't go incognito, so anyway. And then this was really cool. So this is their warehouse venture. So this is where all the supplies are, and people pay money to the warehouse to store their supplies. And so this girl in the picture on the right, she was showing me that when a new venture starts, that they get issued a credit, and then they have to pay it back, and they have to keep records of when the debt is paid back, and show me that if they don't pay it back, there's fines. And I mean, these kids are learning financial literacy, and she's a fourth grader. Okay. So here's the judge. He actually came and spoke to us, and good guy. And so here he is. He's with a picture at Clayburg Elementary, and these young ones are, I guess, part of the court system. So they have judges, and they take it really seriously. So a little tough to read, but this is just some of my thoughts from what I kept hearing over and over, and observations, and how it really tied in with either the profile or of a graduate or our core beliefs. So, students learn and experience real world life lessons, and that's comes right out of our profile of a graduate, prepare students for the world. And it also, one of the folks there made a comment that it allows students to feel pain of bad decisions. When they come up with a bad product, or they're goofing off or whatever, and they go bankrupt, they're learning that lesson. And it's a whole lot better to learn that lesson in elementary school than much later in life. It develops leaders from first grade on, the judges, the police chiefs, the elected officials. They all have a mayor and city council, the venture managers. I mean, in our core beliefs, we talk about develop leadership throughout the system. Well, this is first grade, you know. Students learn responsibility, so they have to be collaborative, you know, within their ventures. And again, that's, you know, profile of a graduate stuff, you know, the collaborative team member. MicroSociety students must be critical thinkers, so that, you know, in order for them to sit and create new products and whatnot and figure out how to get things done, they have to sit down and think through all the issues. And they also learn how to resolve conflict. That's something that the judge talked about, and they also have a policeman there that's very active at the school. And one of the things that came up earlier was about getting the students to, you know, not be, what's the word I'm looking for? That develops a positive relationship between students and police, which is something that Chief Ryder talked about. That does that in this program. I mean, they've seen a dramatic increase in cooperation and really the likability of the police. And so the last thing was it really allows special needs children to fit in there really well, because you can tailor jobs and you can fit kids that have unique abilities into certain jobs. And they gave example after example of how successful they were with that program, and basically you know, integrating special needs students into the program. And so that one student I pointed out during one of the question and answer period, somebody asked a question, and he said, well, you know, I get, you know, pretty active, you know, and I forget the exact word he used. And he said, but, you know, a lot of the kids, they help me calm down. And I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, that's all I have. I'm really excited, and I hope that at some point that, you know, administration can come and maybe put together a proposal for us. It's not an expensive program. So hopefully we can get that going here and maybe one day host our conference. So.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. That was very interesting and informative, and thank you for your PowerPoint presentation. Do we have other special reports from the trustees? Mr. Burdine?
Okay, I just wanted to mention that on June 29th, I did an on-site visit with Oscar Perez at Patterson Elementary. We walked to school, and we're just checking out how things were going. And also July 13th, we also walked Neal and Patterson once again, just to check out how it's coming along. And we had some great visits and some good discussions. So just wanted to report that.
Thank you, Mr. Burdine. We appreciate you doing that for the board. Finally, I just want to remind the board members and everyone in general that tomorrow the special session starts, in case anyone forgot. And so the House and the Senate should be in session by 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Mr. George and I are going to make the trip to Austin tomorrow. We're going to go with other board members. We're going to visit with some of our senators and our representatives and represent Fort Bend ISD and continue the good fight. So we just wanted to make everyone aware of that. Moving on to our consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda in its entirety as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mrs. James. We will now go through. Oh.
Madam, yeah, we need to withdraw 10D.
Yeah, Mr. Rice, we need to pull item 10D.
1B.
10-1B from the 10D1B from the consent agenda. Would you be willing to withdraw your motion, and
I will withdraw my motion with unanimous consent of the board.
Do we need to vote on that, or can we just consent verbally?
We can
Okay. Is everyone in agreement?
Consent.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rice. If you will give me a new motion, please.
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda in its entirety with the exception of item 10D1
B.
D.
B as in boy.
B as in boy.
Second. We have a motion by Mr. Rice and a second by Mr. George. We will now take discussion items. I would like to start with item A1, which contains 3 resolutions that we will be considering regarding the special session of the Texas Legislature. And if I can have board members willing to read these resolutions into the record, I would appreciate that. And we can also take discussion. Before we read them, let's do it this way. Let's read the resolution and then we'll have discussion on the resolution.
I'll read one.
Thank you, Mr. Rice.
I'll read the first one. This is resolution of acknowledgement for constitutional support of public schools. Whereas the mission of the public education system of Texas is to ensure that all Texas children have access to quality education that enables them to achieve their potential and fully participate now and in the future in the social, economic, and educational opportunities of our state and nation. Whereas the governor and the lieutenant governor of Texas have made vouchers a priority on their agendas for the Texas 85th Legislative First Call Session, specifically calling for vouchers and education savings accounts for students with special needs. And whereas the traditional voucher plan, tax credit, education savings account, or special education vouchers would divert public tax dollars to private entities or homeschool students with little or no financial accountability to the state, taxpayers, or local communities, with exemption from state and federal accountability requirements, and are free from the burden of many state and federal regulations and mandates. And whereas the Texas House of Representatives voted 6 times against private school choice during the Texas 85th Legislative Regular Session, it is therefore resolved that the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees respectfully empower and support our respected state legislators to act on behalf of the district's more than 74,000 students and 10,000 employees to uphold their constitutional duty to make suitable provision for the support and maintenance of an efficient system of public free schools, and focus their efforts on supporting the public schools which by their own laws have been created to be available to and accessible by all children. Be it further resolved that state legislators enforce compliance of laws already passed and support, through funding and otherwise, these mandates in order to ensure all special education students have access to resources and programs to support their education. Be it further resolved that state legislators oppose traditional vouchers, tax credit scholarships, ESAs, special education vouchers, and other programs that divert tax dollars away from the more than 90% of the students in public education. And be it further resolved that this priority begins within the leadership of the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees, and together we share one unified message to all involved. We believe all children can learn. We have high expectations for each of the students we serve. We want to use all resources to make the difference in the lives of each child. The future of Texas depends on educating our growing enrollment with diverse needs, and the public schools are charged by the Texas Constitution with this great mission for Texas. Approved and adopted the 17th day of July, 2017 by the Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Do we have discussion on this resolution?
I think it's excellent.
Okay. I think it's excellent too. All right. Resolution number 2, Mr. Rosenthal.
Well, being a recently retired teacher, I feel like I should read this one. Okay. Whereas the 85th Legislative Regular Session adjourned on May 29, 2017, with state lawmakers approving a new 2-year budget that spends less state money per public school student than the previous biennium. Whereas Governor Abbott released 2 proclamations for discussion to the Texas 85th Legislative First Called Session, embedding an unfunded mandate for legislation that would increase the average salary and benefits of teachers by $1,000. Whereas the Fort Bend ISD supports supports local control and allowing local taxpayers to determine how best to spend their tax dollars in their local school districts. Whereas the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees developed 5 goals that district staff use to guide its work for the development of the annual budget, and the 2017-2018 budget supports these goals, which include a major investment to attract and retain staff by offering increases in compensation for all employees, including a minimum increase of $2,500 for staff paid on the teacher salary scale. Whereas the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees adopted a fiscal year of July 1st, effective beginning in 2010, and in accordance with the Texas Education Code, Section 44.001, must prepare a proposed budget by June 19th, with adoption no later than June 30th. It is therefore resolved that the Fort Bend ISD supports teacher pay raises as evidenced by the recent $2,500 pay increase to staff paid on the teacher salary scale, and requests that any mandated pay increases be funded by the state. Be it further resolved that the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees respectfully empower and support our respected state legislators to act on behalf of the district's more than 74,000 students and 10,000 employees by allowing an exemption if the state elects not to fund this mandate of having to increase teacher pay by $1,000 on a July 1st fiscal year that have adopted a budget that already includes teacher compensation increases over $1,000, and be it further resolved that this priority begins with the leadership of the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees, and together we share one unified message to all involved. We believe all children can learn. We have high expectations for each of the students we serve. We want to use all resources to make the difference in the lives of each child. The future of Texas depends on educating our growing enrollment with diverse needs, and the public schools are charged by the Texas Constitution with this great mission for Texas. Approved and adopted the 17th day of July, 2017 by the Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Do we have discussion on this resolution?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal.
Well, first of all, teachers don't make enough money, okay? As one who just spent a year in a classroom, you can't pay me enough to do that again. It's a noble profession. It really is. You really want to get in there and try to do the best you can, but it's tough, and teachers are underpaid. We all know that. But for the legislature to withhold funding, and then after we already come up with our budget, and after we already do everything we can to raise salaries as much as we can, to propose this and not fund it is absurd.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Any other comments? Mr. Rice?
Well, I'm going to reserve my comments for after the third reading.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rice. We'll have the third reading. Mrs. James. I feel like it's mass.
This resolution is on school finance reform. Whereas the Texas Supreme Court, despite recognizing the brokenness of the state's system of financing public education, declined to find the system unconstitutional and concluded it was up to the state legislature to fix the many deficits and inequities that plague the school finance system. Whereas during the Texas 85th legislative regular session that concluded on May 29, 2017, the Texas House of Representatives and the Texas Senate both failed to pass a bill that would have infused $1.8 billion into public education and provided Fort Bend ISD an increase of $8.5 million in additional state aid that would have assisted the district in funding increasing enrollment each year while maintaining programs and initiatives that are in alignment with fulfillment of the board's goals and priorities after vouchers were added to the final version of the bill. Whereas Fort Bend ISD taxpayers will continue to shoulder more of the burden for educating children in 2017-18 as the state share of funding will drop down to 30.7% from 32.2% due to the flawed state funding formula, and the reduction in the share of state funding is occurring even as the district adds students, property values are increasing, and the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees is planning on a reduction in the overall tax rate of 2 pennies to provide some relief to taxpayers. And whereas Fort Bend ISD opens 3 new schools in 2017-18 and has adopted a budget that will utilize $12 million in local reserves to close the gap created by the legislature's failure to act on behalf of public education. It is therefore resolved that the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees respectfully empower and support our respected state legislators to act on behalf of the district's more than 74,000 students and 10,000 employees to support legislation establishing a statewide commission to study and recommend an updated and adequately funded formula-based school finance system which takes into account our district's diverse student characteristics when determining appropriate levels of funding to meet state and local standards. Be it further resolved that Fort Bend ISD supports the efforts of House Bill 21 and asks state legislators to support the increase in funding that was originally proposed and passed by the Texas House of Representatives during the Texas 85th Legislative Regular Session. And be it further resolved that this priority begins within the leadership of the Fort Bend ISD Board of Trustees, and together we share one unified message to all involved. We believe all children can learn. We have high expectations for each of the students we serve. We want to use all resources to make the difference in the lives of each child. The future of Texas depends on educating our growing enrollment with diverse needs, and the public schools are charged by the Texas Constitution with this great mission for Texas. Approved and adopted this 17th day of July, 2017 by the Board of Trustees.
Comments? Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mrs. Tasson. I had the opportunity to visit with Mr. A.J. Craybill along with Mrs. Tasson and Mrs. James last year, and he challenged us all to consider how much time we spent focused on student achievement as opposed to contracts. And I think that this board has demonstrated that we are focused on student achievement, and student achievement is based on teacher preparedness. If teachers are prepared, if they're supported, we're going to have good student achievement. And so we're faced this 85th legislative session, which is now entering a special session, is really unlike any legislative session that we've seen in modern times, I think, where people who profess to be fiscal conservatives, who profess to be in favor of local control, reveal that they really are not. Now, a long time ago, I heard the story of the emperor and the emperor's new clothes. And the emperor came out, his tailor talked him into going out without any clothes on, and all of his subjects said, "Boy, look at the emperor's new clothes, don't they look great?" Until a small boy said, "Wait a minute, the emperor's not wearing any clothes." Well, I'm not a young boy anymore, I'm an old man. And it's time somebody's got to point out the fact that the emperor is not wearing any clothes. The governor's not wearing any clothes. The lieutenant governor's not wearing any clothes. The Senate's not wearing any clothes. And neither is the president of this country or the secretary of education or our 2 senators from Texas. This past session, although the Senate has abandoned public education, the House has not. And our state representatives, Dr. John Zerwas, Mr. Rick Miller, Mr. Phil Stevenson, and Mr. Ron Reynolds, have all supported public education. They have taken the tough votes, they have faded the heat, and believe me, they've gotten it. And I know they're deserving of my continued support, and I hope you feel the same way. In addition to them, this board has also traveled to Austin, some more than others. Mrs. Tasson, Mr. George have been there a lot, Mrs. James. And Mrs. Tasson, I'm not patronizing you, but she has written many op-ed pieces to point out the fact that the emperor is not wearing any clothes. All the while she was campaigning for re-election. And that takes a lot of courage. It takes courage to do that. And so, although it feels as if I have tumbled down the rabbit hole with Alice in Wonderland right now, I hope that our staff and I hope that our teachers take note of what is going on in Austin. It is mystifying to me how the governor can propose we give teachers a raise and not pay for it. I had a conversation with Senator Colcourt. She said, "What's that do to you?" I said, "Well, we have 5,000 teachers. That's $5 million. We're taking a hit. We've lost $12 million in revenue this time around because the legislature has based its revenue on property values being capped at 7%. And our property values are only going to hit 5%. So we've got a deficit there. And as has been pointed out, we've already taken the steps, which took some reach on the part of the board and the administration to find ways, at the time we thought, to generate revenue to give all of our teachers a raise, all of the staff a raise, as a matter of fact. And we're still going to find a way to do that, in spite of the governor of the second most populous state in the United States of America. There are more children going to school in Texas than any other state except California. And we're adding 70,000 students a year to the public education system. So although Texas has a winning hand today, if we don't start creating real solutions to real problems, we're going to find ourselves in trouble in the space of a generation. And I'm going to encourage any teacher who may be listening to exercise their right to vote in these upcoming elections. Support the people who are supporting public education. Support the people who are trying to do good things, right things, just things for the benefit of all of our kids, really for the benefit of all the people in this great state of Texas, which we all love. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. It's very well said. Do we have other comments from the board members? Mr. Rosenthal.
I just have one more. Although I am a supporter of the governor, I think it's clear for many of the folks that, and I haven't really been paying that much attention personally, but so I don't know who put forth this whole idea about the $1,000 pay raise, but I think the folks that up there that want to support it, I think they're looking at their next push card and they want to be able to say supported pay raises for teachers, you know, without the whole backstory of, well, why did you wait till after so many school districts passed their budget knowing that you weren't going to pay another penny for it? So it's easy for them to do that. And I think it's pretty sad that they actually would do something like that because it's meaningless. What their words are meaningless.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. So I'm gonna close out this discussion really quickly with a couple of things. First of all, the quorum report reported today. Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick were at the Texas Public Policy Forum meeting, and Governor Abbott said, "I'm going to be establishing a list. You all or other organizations may be establishing a list. We all need to establish lists that we publish on a daily basis where we call people out. Who is for this, who is against this, and who hasn't taken a position yet. No one gets to hide." So I wanted to read that because honestly it really ticks me off, because I think what you said, Mr. Rosenthal, is exactly right. They're trying to hide. And I feel very strongly that our lieutenant governor is trying to hide, because I think he knows that his play for vouchers is probably dead, because the House is going to vote against it again if they stand firm. And I encourage everyone who's listening to call them up, make your voice heard, and help them to stand firm during the special session. But I think he knows it's dead, and so now he's got to be on the side of public education. At least that's what it seems like. You know, the ball keeps moving. None of these things were important enough to discuss during the regular session. Where was the lieutenant governor? Where was the governor, for that matter, during the regular session? If this was so important, why wasn't it there? Why didn't we have the conversation then? So it just seems a little disingenuous to me. I'm not going to read it into the record, but I wrote another op-ed that's going to be published in the Texas Tribune tomorrow, because we just got word that Ross Ramsey's going to pick it up. And it's a direct response to the lieutenant governor. And it's entitled, Lieutenant Governor's Education Agenda Reeks Anti-Conservative. Because anybody who knows me knows that I am a conservative. I am a conservative. And so it's appalling to me that lawmakers can sit in Austin and call themselves conservative and micromanage school districts as if we are incompetent on the one hand, or if voters are just completely stupid. It's insulting. It insults me, and it insults every voter in this district. And so we already passed the pay raises. Thank you very much. We didn't need your help for that. And clearly, we already saved our rainy day fund, thanks to Mr. Bassett and Dr. Dupree and the leadership on this board. And so we pulled our money out because guess what? It's raining. It's raining. So I'd like to know what the definition of a rainy day is up there in Austin. Because if this isn't it, I don't know what is. If this isn't it, I don't know what is. So they're willing to sacrifice our children and act like school districts have enough and we just need to reprioritize our dollars, which is what the lieutenant governor said. And so he wants to mandate how we spend them now. And I'll read you one part of the op-ed that I wrote. And it says, I'm often asked by one of our conservative representatives if our district needs more money. My answer to him is always, what we really need is less regulation and fewer unfunded mandates. The truth that most lawmakers in Austin fail to tell you is that our budgets are largely driven by state mandates. If our budgets need to be reprioritized, then the legislature needs to reprioritize and stop passing laws that they can't or won't fund. Districts pay for many of the things they pass. And that's the reality. That's the reality and the truth that's not being told. So I want to thank this board for their leadership and for being bold in passing resolutions and in taking the lead in this state. And I am very proud to be part of this board. And I'm very proud that we have advocated for our students and for our teachers and for what we think is best. And we've not backed down just because there are people who seem to be very powerful that don't tell the truth.
You go, girl.
Mrs. James.
Thank you, Mrs. Tosa, and thank you for those comments, and also thank you for your leadership in helping to express clearly and in writing what we all are thinking and what we're feeling. So we appreciate your effort. And I just want to add that I've been asked by one of our neighboring districts for copies of our resolutions, and I would like to pass those on, and when other trustees ask me, I may pass them on as well, because I think, again, a united front from this region and from Fort Bend County would be helpful. And again, as you say, to give those representatives who need some cover, or maybe some senators who need some courage, the knowledge that the school districts and the trustees of this region are in agreement on these issues. So thank you for writing them and your effort in that.
Thank you, Mrs. James. I appreciate that. And I think we should keep our own list so that the senators and representatives don't get to hide either, because they try to hide behind things that aren't true. And the only way that we can combat that is to keep telling the truth. So thank you for that. Thank you for passing those on. I think it is important as well.
Can I make one more comment?
Yes, Mr. Rosenthal.
As someone else who kind of tends to bounce off the right wall, it's not conservative at all to sit there and legislate things from 200 miles away. Now, I do understand that there are some districts that actually do spend most of their time worrying about what color the end zone is. I sat in A.J. Crabill's session in Austin. I didn't even know who he was. You know, I picked a session, and I was sitting there, and the guy says, "My name's A.J." And it took me about 5 minutes to realize, because he never said his last name, to realize, oh, that's A.J. Crabill. But he asked questions, you know, in the audience. You know, how many boards do self-assessments? How many, you know, have these goals and I looked around, and I'm telling you, there were probably half of them that they'd never done that stuff before. So I'm not wavering from some support of any of these resolutions by any means, but I'm saying there are cases where you can kind of see where legislators might want to, you know, look to these things, but it's really probably the minority that they have to worry about. And I know this board, it's especially the last, you know, 4 or 5 years, it's never been an issue. You know, yeah, sometimes we do have to get, you know, concerned about certain spending items that maybe don't seem to directly relate to accountability and achievement, but most of the stuff we talk about does. And so, you know, we are not one of the districts and one of the boards that a lot of those folks are trying to address with what they're trying to do. So.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. Okay, do we have a discussion about other items on the consent agenda? Mrs. James.
Yes, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the policy in board policy DBA local, which is item B1A. And the updated policy, I think Dr. Dupree emailed all of us that it's at our places, the updated policy. The policy committee worked on this over the, while everyone is on vacation. The policy committee was hard at work. Even me, even you, Dave. Anyway, so we've updated this. I think it's a good, I guess, I don't know that I particularly need to comment to you, except that I think it reflects what the District Innovation Committee was going for. I think it provides appropriate board oversight as non-certified educators might be employed in our district for purposes of filling hard-to-fill positions as defined in the local innovation plan. So I feel very comfortable with it. I did have one question, though, Dr. Dupree, that was outstanding, and that was regarding accreditation of schools or of the district, and at what point would the non-certified educators put that into jeopardy? Did we have an answer to that?
I put that question out. I don't know that we have an answer. Did you all come up with any follow-up on that? I know all of our schools went through the accreditation process this year, and as I looked at it, I know that, and I'm just going to kind of make this up, and you all can tell me on the fly. I think with No Child Left Behind going away, I don't think there's any issue from the federal level, so it truly would be an accreditation. I don't perceive that there's a problem, but we'll definitely follow up with a definitive answer to that.
Okay, that would be great, because that was the only, I think the board feels responsibility to make sure we wouldn't have any accreditation issues. So if you could follow up on that, that would be great. But besides that, I feel like this policy provides good oversight, provides the checks and balances, requires some reporting to the board, and again, the superintendent has the authority and will be held accountable for the hiring of the non-certified educators.
Thank you, Mrs. James, and thank you to you and Mr. Rosenthal and the policy committee for working on that for us. We appreciate that.
Well, don't you worry. We're going to keep working all summer, because we'll have a whole passel of more policies.
That's awesome.
Next time.
We love you for that. Thank you. Okay, any other questions on the policy?
By the end.
Yes,
Mr.
Madam
Rice?
President. 10D2, consider approval of an order authorizing the issuance of unlimited tax refunding bonds. This is to amend the May action that we took. Is that right, Dr. Dupree?
Yes, sir.
And then
Yes, sir.
you're planning to come back in August or September with another refunding offering?
Yes. Steve, you want to hit the deadline or the timeline on that?
Yes, so we have this is to expand the refunding that has already been approved from 2008s only to add the 2009s as potential candidates for refunding. But then we would also bring, in September, we'll have $100 million of our commercial paper done and ready to be fixed out again. That would be a separate transaction that we would bring in August to be executed in September.
Okay, so has Mr. Villasenor and Mr. Frells reviewed this current one?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Do we have additional questions on that item? Okay, hearing none. Do we have additional items?
Yes.
Mrs. James?
Yes, I have this isn't as much a question as it is a comment regarding C3B, which is the band and orchestra instruments, equipment, and related items. This is a purchasing item. And I asked a question in email this week about this because I was curious as to where these instruments are going to be used. So I just want to be clear that I'm definitely in favor of musical instrument refreshing, and I'm glad we've got this kind of on a cycle now to make sure we have quality instruments available for our students to learn on. But one of the questions I asked was where these instruments would be used, and during that email, I came to understand that we have band and orchestra programs at all of our secondary campuses, with the exception of McCullough Middle School and Willow Ridge High School. And I just like to comment that's concerning to me because I know we eliminated a piano program at Willow Ridge High School, and we don't have an orchestra program at those schools. And I'm concerned that that's really not in the best interest of those students in that feeder pattern. So I'd like to offer a couple of suggestions. And I've heard before, I believe, that we don't have a lot of interest in orchestra, or we don't haven't had a lot of sign-ups and things like that. And I'd like to suggest that maybe we try some extra exposure at the elementary levels, the feeder schools, the elementary schools and middle school that feed to McCullough and need to be going to the symphony. They need to have the symphony come visit them. We need to be out at the Fort Bend Symphony. We need to be at the Houston Symphony. We need to do other activities that expose students to a variety of instruments. We need to have other middle schools maybe visit those elementary schools and McCullough Middle School so we can develop an orchestra program in that feeder pattern.
Thank you, Mrs. James. Do we have additional comments on this item? Ms. Helliger?
Yes, I would just like to add to that. You know, I think you've hit the nail on the head with that, of exposing more of our students to those types of arts. I remember myself when I was in high school, I got an opportunity to play the flute. I wasn't really exposed to it, but the school system provided me an incentive. I'm trying to wrap my brains around what that incentive was for me to learn the flute and play in the band and other types of activities. There was something that I gained from it, and I'm really, it's going to come to me. But I said, oh, I'll sign up. And even though I had played the piano, I knew how to read music, but I had never thought of playing another type of instrument. And it wasn't until the school provided me some type of incentive to do so, and I was able to learn another instrument. I mean, so I think, you know, that's something that we can definitely explore, because the kids, once again, we've talked about this here on at the board level, people don't know what they don't know. If they've never been exposed to it, they're not going to be readily to sign up for it. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Helliger. I would add, too, that this is part of our profile of a graduate. I mean, we want kids exposed to this, so I think those are good comments. We also all know that music helps with cognitive development, so in those early years, those kinds of things are good, so I would support that. Do we have additional comments on this item? Okay, hearing none. Do we have additional items for discussion? Okay, hearing none, please vote. Motion passes. We have the word action, but we don't have anything under that.
Nothing,
Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't missing something.
just in case you move anything down.
We didn't move anything. Okay, so now we're going to discuss future board meeting agenda items.
Yes, you'll notice this document is shorter than usual because it is July, and we're planning the next year of governance reports for the board and updates on the plans and those kinds of things. So, but we have a couple of biggies in August. We'll be doing a bond program update on the August 14th workshop agenda. That'll be immediately following the Bond Oversight Committee meeting that's held in August. We're also looking at, on August 28th, we'll be discussing student performance and accountability for the 2016-17 school year, as well as a student assessment update, including the framework and philosophy for student assessment. The other major issue that's going to come in August, and we're going to be seeking board approval actually on August the 14th, are a handful of policies that pertain to the Student Code of Conduct and the Student Code of Conduct for the 17-18 school year. We just this week, today, received the draft Student Code of Conduct and the legislative update based on the last legislative session. That'll enable us to immediately get to work drafting the Code of Conduct. That's a lot of work, but we're going to get it done to get it to you. We're also going to be working with the Policy Committee in the next few weeks to refine these policies in support of the Code of Conduct. So I guess they will be working during the summer. And then, as you can see, there's just a handful
Because
of
if it's not in policy,
It doesn't exist.
And so there's a handful of other items, as you can see, that'll be coming forward as well, but there's no need to read those all aloud. Are there any questions, feedback, or other work?
I would just like to add that this was our first time to do our new agenda format. So did everybody, you liked it?
Oh, let me comment on that.
Okay.
So I immediately noticed, where's my agenda? Let me borrow
You
mine.
use mine, okay.
I noticed the fact that the agenda was written around our goals, and to me, that helps me know that that the activities that we're doing is directly related to the goals and is measurable to me. So I did want to thank you all for the rearrangement of the agenda, and it was noticed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elliger. If there is any other feedback, please do let Jay know. We're taking all of your suggestions, and we'll work on it. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you.